The error message blinked red across 3 monitors at once, and David Reed knew he was about to have a very long day. He sat hunched in the cramped server room of the Pathfinder, humanity's first diplomatic vessel venturing into the wider galaxy. Around him, cables snaked across every surface like electronic vines, and the smell of overheated processors filled the air. His job was simple enough: connect humanity's computer systems to the galactic network so everyone could finally talk to the aliens properly. Simple. Jobs never stayed simple. David typed another command and watched as the connection protocol loaded. Humanity had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. The aliens called the architects had built something called the Divine Network that connected thousands of species across countless worlds. Every civilization used it. Every government, every business, every person who wanted to send a message to another star system had to go through the architect's network, and now humanity was plugging in for the first time. The screen flashed green. Connection established. David leaned back in his chair and let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. Around the ship, terminals would be lighting up as crew members gained access to galactic databases, translation services, and communication channels. Humanity was officially online. David pulled up the network diagnostics out of habit. After 15 years of keeping computer systems running, checking for problems was automatic. He expected to see something impressive. The architects had been running this network for thousands of years. Their technology was supposed to be beyond human understanding. What he saw instead made him stop chewing his sandwich. The protocols were ancient. Not alien advanced ancient, actually old. Like older than they should be. David recognized some of the basic structure, because it reminded him of networking standards humanity had moved past decades ago. He ran a deeper scan, frowning at his screen. The security was terrible. He found open ports that should have been closed. He found authentication systems that barely checked credentials. He found data flowing through unencrypted channels that any decent hacker could intercept. Worse, he found documentation files sitting in publicly accessible directories, the kind of files that should have been locked behind multiple passwords and security clearances. David clicked on one of the files. It opened immediately. No password required, no security check, nothing. He was reading classified architect system documentation and nobody had even asked his name. This had to be a mistake. The architects were the closest thing the galaxy had to gods. Every species looked up to them. They maintained order, provided technology, and kept the peace. Their systems were supposed to be perfect. David opened another file, then another. Each one opened without any resistance. He found himself staring at maintenance logs, system architecture diagrams, and internal communications between architect administrators. It was like someone had left the keys to the galaxy sitting on a desk with a sign saying, "Free stuff, take what you want." His terminal beeped. An automated message appeared on screen. It was from the architect's central system, written in formal, flowery language that the translation software struggled with. The basic meaning came through clearly enough. Humanity's systems were too chaotic and needed to conform to divine standards. Human technology was primitive and disruptive to the natural order of perfect networks. David looked at the message, then at the dozen security vulnerabilities he had just found, then back at the message. He almost laughed, but the situation was not funny. It was terrifying. Billions of people across thousands of worlds trusted this network with everything. Governments made decisions based on data flowing through these systems. Ships navigated through space using these coordinates. Medical facilities shared patient information across these channels, and it was all held together with digital duct tape. He stood up and walked down the narrow corridor to find Captain Rita Okonkwo. She was in the main operations room, reviewing diplomatic protocols with her staff. David waited for a pause in the conversation. "Captain, we need to talk about the network connection." Rita looked up and smiled. "Is everything working?" The translation services came online perfectly. "I was just able to read a treaty document from the Vrin Empire without any problems." "Everything works," David said carefully. "But I found some security issues. Serious ones. The architect's network has vulnerabilities that could compromise every system connected to it." Rita's smile faded. "What kind of vulnerabilities?" "The kind where I accidentally became a system administrator for half the galaxy, just by running a standard diagnostic check." One of the diplomatic staff members, an older woman named Patricia, shook her head. That's impossible. The architects have maintained this network for millennia. Every species relies on it. If there were security problems, someone would have noticed. I'm noticing right now, David said. He pulled out his tablet and showed them the open files, the exposed directories, the complete lack of authentication on critical systems. I'm not even trying to hack anything. This is just basic IT security scanning, the kind of thing any network administrator does on their first day. Rita studied the tablet screen, her expression growing more concerned. Can you fix it? I can close our access points and secure our connection. But the bigger network? Captain, I don't even know where to start. And I'm not sure we should try. We just joined the Galactic community. If we go around telling everyone that their godlike architects don't know how to set a proper firewall, that's going to cause problems. So what do we do? Rita asked. David opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. His tablet was beeping. He looked down and felt his stomach drop. The diagnostic program was still running, scanning deeper into the architect's systems. And it had just found something new. Captain, he said quietly, we have a bigger problem. There's a memory leak in the core communication system. Has been building for centuries according to these logs. At the current rate, the entire network is going to crash in about 72 hours. The room went silent. The architects know about this, right? Patricia asked. They're working on it? David scrolled through the error logs. Thousands of automated warnings, all marked as low priority, all ignored. Some of them were older than human civilization. I don't think they know how to fix it, David said. I don't think they even know how to read these logs anymore. Rita sat down heavily in her chair. Outside the window, stars stretched into infinity. And somewhere among them, thousands of species went about their lives, trusting that the gods who built their network knew what they were doing. David looked at his tablet and watched the countdown continue. 72 hours until the galaxy went dark, and the gods had no idea their divine creation was about to die. Amy Park stared at the code on her screen and whispered a curse word that would have made her grandmother disappointed. She had seen bad security before. She had seen lazy security. She had even seen security so terrible it seemed deliberate. But this was different. This was security built by someone who understood just enough to be dangerous, then abandoned by people who understood nothing at all. David had called an emergency meeting in the server room at midnight ship time. The 4 members of humanity's IT crew now sat crowded around a single workstation, their faces lit by monitor glow. David, Amy, Leon Kowalski, and Priya Sharma represented humanity's entire technical support team for first contact with galactic civilization. Right now, they were possibly the only people in the galaxy who understood how bad things really were. Show them what you showed me, David said. Amy pulled up the architect's core system architecture. This is their main communication hub. See these comments in the code? She pointed to lines of text embedded in the programming. This one says temporary fix until we understand the quantum relay issue. It's dated 4,000 years ago. This one says do not modify system breaks if we change anything. This one just says why does this work? Who wrote this? Please help. Leon leaned closer to the screen. He was their hardware specialist, more comfortable with physical components than software, but even he could see the problem. They don't know how their own system works. Worse, Priya said. She had been digging through the databases for the past hour. They used to know. Look at this. She pulled up documentation from 12,000 years ago. The writing was clear, technical, and precise. It explained every component of the network, every protocol, every security measure. These are the original architects, the ones who actually built this thing. They were scientists, engineers, really good ones. What happened? Amy asked. Time happened. Priya scrolled forward through the documentation. The clarity began to fade. Technical explanations turned into descriptions of divine will. Maintenance procedures became holy rituals. By 6,000 years ago, the documentation read less like a user manual and more like a religious text. The original builders died out or moved on. The next generation treated the technology like magic. They stopped understanding it and started worshiping it. David rubbed his eyes. So we're trusting our communication, our navigation, our everything to a civilization that turned IT maintenance into a religion? It gets better, Amy said, though her tone suggested it definitely did not get better. I found their incident reports. Every time something breaks, they blame it on the unworthiness of the species using the network. There's a report here from 300 years ago, where the Vrin Empire lost all communication for 2 weeks. The architects told them it was divine punishment for insufficient prayer. The actual cause was a corrupted routing table that any first-year networking student could have fixed in 10 minutes. Leon picked up a datapad and started scrolling through system logs. These cooling systems are failing. Like actually failing right now. The hardware is centuries past its replacement date. Some of these components are held together by molecular bonding that's degrading. In another few years, physical systems are going to start breaking down, and I don't think the architects will know how to fix them. Can we fix it? David asked. Any of it? The room went quiet. Priya broke the silence. Maybe, if we had time and access and cooperation. But David, we're talking about infrastructure that connects thousands of species across millions of light years. This isn't patching a few security holes. This is rebuilding the foundation while the house is still standing on it. And the memory leak? Amy asked. The one that's going to crash everything in 3 days? David pulled up the diagnostic results. It's in the core message routing system. Every time a message gets sent, the system allocates memory to process it. But there's a bug in the cleanup routine. The memory doesn't get released properly. It just accumulates. For 500 years, it's been building up. In 70 hours, the system runs out of memory and everything stops. The architects must know, Leon said. They must have monitoring systems. Amy pulled up the architect's administrative dashboard. It was filled with alerts. Thousands of them. Maybe millions. They stretched back centuries. Each one marked with increasing urgency, each one ignored. They have alerts. They just don't know what they mean. Look at this one. Critical memory threshold exceeded. It's been flashing red for 200 years. There are notes attached from architect administrators saying they've offered prayers and performed sacred maintenance rituals. Did they try turning it off and on again? Leon asked. Everyone looked at him. I'm serious, Leon said. That's usually step 1. Have they ever rebooted the system? Priya checked the logs. Not in recorded history. There's a note here saying the system has achieved eternal runtime and must never be interrupted, or the divine connection will be severed. They've never rebooted their servers, Amy said slowly. Not once, not ever. They have uptime measured in geological eras. David stood up and started pacing in the tiny room. Okay, here's what we know. The galactic network is going to crash in 3 days. The civilization running it doesn't understand how to fix it. If it crashes, every species loses communication, navigation, data transfer, everything. Ships could be stranded. Governments could fall. People could die. We have to tell someone, Amy said. Tell them what? Priya asked. That their gods are incompetent? That we, the new species who just joined last week, somehow know more about their sacred technology than they do? Who's going to believe us? David's tablet beeped. A message appeared on screen, formal and decorated with symbols that the translator marked as indicating extreme importance. He read it aloud. The Tribunal of the Architects requests the presence of the human technical specialists to address unauthorized access to divine systems. You will present yourselves for judgment within 24 hours. Failure to comply will result in humanity's disconnection from the galactic network and permanent quarantine. They know we were poking around, Leon said. They know someone was poking around, Amy corrected. I bet they don't actually know what we found. They probably just got an automated alert and don't know how to interpret it. David looked at his team. So we have a choice. We can go face this tribunal, probably get yelled at, maybe get humanity kicked out of the Galactic Club before we even unpack. Or we can keep quiet, let the system crash and watch galactic civilization collapse. Or, Priya said slowly, we go to the tribunal and we tell them the truth. We show them the memory leak. We offer to help. Maybe they'll listen. And if they don't? Leon asked. Amy pulled up the countdown timer on her screen. 69 hours and counting. Then we'd better learn to fix galaxy-scale IT problems really fast, because nobody else is going to do it. David saved all their findings to an encrypted drive. Documentation, evidence, proof that the gods were not actually divine, just really old and really lost. He looked at his team and saw the same mix of fear and determination on each face. Pack your laptops, he said. We're going to meet some gods. And we're going to give them the worst news they've heard in 1,000 years. Outside the window, the stars continued their ancient patterns. unaware that the network connecting them all was counting down to silence. Somewhere in the distance, in a massive station orbiting a dying star, the architects prepared to judge humanity for the crime of seeing what everyone else had been too afraid to notice. The gods were about to get a bug report they could not ignore. The tribunal chamber was designed to make visitors feel small, and it was working. David stood at the center of a massive circular room where walls stretched upward into darkness that seemed to have no ceiling. Pillars of light descended from above, illuminating 7 raised platforms where the architects sat in judgment. They were tall beings, easily 3 meters high, with skin that glowed faintly blue and robes that seemed to shift colors depending on the angle of viewing. Everything about them screamed ancient power and superiority. Behind David, his team waited with Captain Rita and a handful of diplomatic staff. In the viewing galleries that ringed the chamber, representatives from dozens of species watched in silence. Word had spread quickly. The new humans were being judged by the architects. This was entertainment, education, and warning all at once. The central architect rose from his platform. His nameplate identified him as Chief Administrator Solemnith, though David suspected that was a title rather than a name. When Solemnith spoke, his voice came from everywhere at once, deep and resonant and probably enhanced by very good speakers hidden in the walls. Humanity, Solemnith began. You stand before the tribunal to answer for crimes against the divine order. You have violated sacred systems. You have accessed that which is forbidden. You have demonstrated the chaos that comes from allowing primitive species too much freedom. David clutched his laptop bag and tried to remember the speech he had practiced. Rita had coached him on diplomatic language. Amy had told him to stay calm. Leon had suggested not mentioning that the architects were basically running their civilization on the IT equivalent of hopes and prayers. With respect, David said, and his voice sounded tiny in the enormous chamber. We didn't mean to violate anything. I was just running standard diagnostics. Standard diagnostics. Solemnith made it sound like a curse. You presume to diagnose the divine? The network has functioned perfectly for thousands of years, maintained by our wisdom and power. Your intrusion is both arrogant and dangerous. This was the moment. David could apologize, back down, let humanity get disconnected from the network and maybe save face. Or he could tell the truth and risk everything. He thought about the countdown timer. 62 hours until the crash. David reached into his bag and pulled out his laptop. Sir, I need to show you something. Your network is in trouble. Serious trouble. A ripple of shock went through the viewing galleries. One of the other architects, a female who had been silent until now, leaned forward. You dare to suggest that our perfect creation has flaws? I'm saying it has a critical error that's going to cause a complete system failure in less than 3 days, David said. He opened his laptop and pulled up the diagnostic data. There's a memory leak in your core routing system. Has been building for 5 centuries. When it hits maximum capacity, everything stops. No communication, no navigation, no data transfer. Everything goes dark. Solemnith's glow dimmed slightly. Impossible. Our systems are self-healing. They are maintained by divine will. Your systems are maintained by code written 10,000 years ago, and that code has a bug. David turned his laptop around, showing the screen to the tribunal. See these logs? These are automated warnings. You've been getting them for 200 years. This one says critical memory threshold exceeded. This one says system stability compromised. This one just says help. Another architect spoke up, younger than the others with a nervous edge to her voice. We receive many automated messages. They are acknowledgments of our continuous divine supervision. They're error messages, Amy said from behind David, and you've been ignoring them because you don't know how to read them. The chamber erupted in noise. Species in the galleries began talking among themselves. Some of the architects rose from their seats, their glows fluctuating in what David guessed was agitation. Solemnith raised a hand, and silence fell. These are serious accusations, human. Do you have proof? David pulled up the memory usage graphs. The line climbed steadily upward, century after century, approaching a hard limit. This is your proof. In 62 hours, this line hits the maximum value. When that happens, the system cannot allocate memory for new messages. Everything locks up. The entire network freezes. Then we will perform the sacred maintenance ritual, Solemnith said. But David heard uncertainty in his voice now. We have maintained the network through such ceremonies since the beginning of time. Have you ever actually rebooted the system? Leon asked. Like full shutdown and restart? The architects looked at each other. Solemnith's glow pulsed with what might have been offense. The network achieves eternal runtime. To interrupt it would be to sever the divine connection between all species. It would also clear the memory leak, Priya said, temporarily at least. But you'd need to fix the underlying code or the problem just comes back. A voice called out from the viewing gallery. It belonged to a Vryn representative, an insect-like creature with translator equipment attached to its thorax. Tribunal, I must speak. 300 years ago, our empire lost all communication for 2 weeks. We were told it was divine punishment. If what these humans say is true, was that also a memory problem? Solemnith did not answer. Another voice joined in. This one from a Kolith delegate, its crystalline body refracting light in sharp angles. We have maintained backup systems because the divine network is unreliable. We were told our lack of faith made us unworthy. Was that also a lie? The chamber dissolved into chaos. Species that had accepted architect authority for millennia were suddenly asking questions. The perfect facade was cracking and everyone could see the truth underneath. David raised his voice over the noise. I'm not here to accuse anyone or destroy your authority. I'm here because I don't want to watch billions of people lose communication when this system crashes. Let me help. Let my team help. We can fix this. You are a primitive species that joined our network days ago, Solemnith said. But the power had gone out of his voice. What could you possibly know that we do not? I know how to read error logs, David said simply. I know how to trace memory leaks. I know how to fix systems that are broken. And right now your system is broken. The youngest architect, the nervous one who had spoken earlier, stood up. Her nameplate read Administrator Thessaly. Chief Administrator, permission to speak freely. Solemnith gestured wearily. Speak. I have studied the ancient texts, Thessaly said. The ones from the original builders. They wrote that future generations should always question, always test, always seek to improve. We turned their wisdom into dogma. We stopped questioning because we were afraid of appearing ignorant. But ignorance hidden is more dangerous than ignorance admitted. She looked at David. Show me these error logs. Teach me to read them. If what you say is true, then we have been failing in our duty for centuries. Solemnith seemed to age before their eyes. His glow dimmed further and his shoulders sagged. If we admit to this failure, we lose everything. Our authority, our purpose, the respect of every species in the galaxy. You'll lose more if the network crashes and you can't fix it, Rita said gently. Let us help. Not as conquerors or critics, as colleagues who happen to have different training. The tribunal went into emergency session, speaking among themselves in low voices that the chamber acoustics did not carry. The galleries waited. David's team waited. The countdown continued its relentless march toward zero. Finally, Solemnith turned back to face the chamber. Very well. The humans will be granted access to attempt a solution. But know this. If you fail, if you cause damage, if you prove unable to fulfill these claims, humanity will be banished from the galactic community forever. David nodded slowly. Understood. But I'm going to need something in return. You dare make demands? Another architect asked. I need complete access to your systems, full documentation, and I need you to tell every species in the galaxy the truth. Not now, but after we fix this. People deserve to know their network was failing, and that it took cooperation to save it. Solemnith looked like he wanted to refuse, but he looked at the countdown on David's screen, at the evidence that could not be denied, at the species in the galleries who were already questioning everything they had believed. Agreed, he said quietly. Save our network, humans, and may your gods grant you better success than ours have granted us. David closed his laptop and looked at his team. They had 60 hours to save galactic civilization, and the only tools they had were coffee, determination, and a really good understanding of how terrible legacy code could get. It was time to get to work. Leon tripped over the power cable and caught himself on a server rack that swayed dangerously under his weight. Around him, the architect's primary server facility hummed and buzzed and occasionally made clicking sounds that no healthy computer system should ever make. Dust covered everything in a fine gray layer. Some of the equipment looked older than human civilization, which was probably because it was older than human civilization. Careful, Amy said, steadying the rack. I think that one is holding up structural components for the whole station. Why would a server rack hold up structural components? Leon asked. Because nobody here knows the difference between load-bearing architecture and data architecture, Priya said from somewhere behind a wall of ancient terminals. I found a cooling pipe that someone routed through a primary data bus. If it leaks, we lose communication with 17 sectors. David stood in the center of the room with Administrator Thessaly, reviewing system diagrams on a holographic display. The countdown showed 54 hours remaining. They had already spent 6 hours just finding the actual physical location of the servers. The architects had built elaborate temples and monuments to their network, but the actual hardware was in a basement that nobody had visited in 3 centuries. This cannot be real, Thessaly said, looking around the room with something like horror in her glowing eyes. I was taught that our network was maintained through divine harmony, that the systems existed in perfect synchronization with the universe itself. They exist in synchronization with gravity and luck, Leon said, examining a power distribution unit. Mostly luck. This PDU is rated for maybe 10% of the load it's currently carrying. It should have melted into slag decades ago. Thessaly touched one of the servers carefully, as if afraid it might crumble under her fingers. The original builders would be ashamed of us. We took their science and turned it into prayer. David pulled up the memory leak data on his laptop. We can worry about shame later. Right now, we need to figure out if we can actually fix this. Amy, what's the security situation? Amy had been working on a separate terminal, her fingers flying across a keyboard that looked like it had been designed for hands much larger than human. I've locked down external access and set up proper authentication protocols. The good news is that nobody else can stumble into admin privileges anymore. The bad news is that I found evidence of at least 40 unauthorized species who have been inside these systems over the past century, and none of them reported the problems they must have seen. Why not? Thessaly asked. Same reason we almost didn't, Priya said. Who wants to tell the gods they're wrong? Easier to grab what you need and keep quiet. David traced the memory leak to its source in the code. The routing system was a mess of patches built on patches built on patches. Someone thousands of years ago had written a function to handle message routing. Someone else had modified it. Someone else had added features. Generation after generation, the code grew more complex and less efficient, and nobody ever went back to clean it up. Found it, David said. The cleanup routine is calling the wrong memory delocation function. Every message processed leaves a small chunk of memory marked as in use but actually abandoned. Over 500 years, those small chunks add up to catastrophic system failure. Can you fix it? Thessaly asked. I can patch it. But patching isn't enough. This whole system needs to be rebuilt from the ground up. David pulled up line after line of problematic code. Look at this. Functions calling functions, none of which are documented. Variables with names like temp-ifix do not use that are clearly being used. Comments saying this works but we don't know why. Leon appeared from behind a server stack, his face smudged with dust. Hardware situation is worse than we thought. I've identified 17 critical components that are past failure point. They're working on momentum and prayer, and I'm not sure which one is more effective. How long until they fail? David asked. Could be tomorrow. Could be next year. Could be while we're trying to implement the fix and bring the whole thing down on our heads. Leon wiped his hands on his pants. We need replacement parts, but everything here is so old I don't think anyone manufactures compatible components anymore. Priya emerged from her terminal station looking exhausted. Database situation is a nightmare. I've found 17 different versions of the same data, all conflicting with each other. Nobody ever implemented proper data normalization. They just kept adding new tables and hoping for the best. I found star charts that show 3 different positions for the same planet. Thessaly sank down onto a chair that creaked under her weight. How did we fall so far? The original architects were brilliant. They built something that connected the entire galaxy. How did we lose all of that knowledge? Time and arrogance, Amy said, not unkindly. Each generation probably understood a bit less than the previous one. Instead of admitting that and preserving what they could, they pretended they still knew everything. Faked it until faking it became the standard. Eventually, nobody remembered there was anything real to know. David checked the countdown. 52 hours. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We can't fix everything. We don't have time and we don't have resources. But we can triage. Priya, focus on making sure critical databases stay consistent. Amy, keep the security locked down and monitor for any intrusions. Leon, identify which hardware components are most likely to fail during a reboot and see if we can jury-rig temporary replacements. What about the memory leak? Thessaly asked. David pulled up his code editor. I'm going to patch it. It's not elegant and it's not permanent, but it'll stop the immediate crisis. But here's the thing. To implement the patch, we need to reboot the system. Full shutdown, apply the fix, bring it back online. The room went silent. Thessaly's glow flickered. The network has never been shut down. Not in recorded history. If we turn it off, what if it doesn't come back on? If we don't shut it down, it crashes anyway in 2 days, Amy pointed out. At least this way we control when and how it happens. How long would the shutdown take? Thessaly asked. David did mental calculations.
6 hours.
Maybe 8. Full diagnostic, apply the patch, restart all systems in sequence, verify everything is working. We announce it in advance, give people time to prepare, schedule it during low traffic periods. 8 hours without galactic communication, Thessaly said quietly. 8 hours where ships cannot navigate, where governments cannot coordinate, where families cannot contact each other across the stars. 8 hours where the entire galaxy is blind and deaf and alone. Or 2 days of the same thing except unplanned, and with no guarantee we can bring it back at all, Priya said. Pick your crisis. Thessaly stood up and walked to the observation window. Outside, the stars hung in their ancient patterns, connected by invisible threads of communication that humanity's IT crew was trying desperately to preserve. I need to take this to the tribunal. They need to authorize a planned shutdown. Will they approve it? Leon asked. They have to, Thessaly said. The alternative is admitting that we let the network die through negligence and pride. At least this way we're trying to save it. She turned back to the human team. I never expected to see the divine made mundane. It's humbling and terrifying, but also hopeful. If our technology is not magic, then it can be understood. If it can be understood, it can be improved. Perhaps we needed you humans precisely because you never believed we were gods. David saved his code patch and started preparing documentation for the shutdown procedure. Thessaly, when this is over, we need to talk about training programs. The galaxy needs more than 4 humans who know how to read error logs. Every species should have people who understand these systems. You're thinking beyond the immediate crisis, Thessaly observed. Someone has to, David said, because fixing a memory leak is just the beginning. Your whole infrastructure is held together with digital duct tape. It'll take years to modernize it properly, maybe decades, and we can't do it alone. Amy pulled up a priority list on her screen. For now, let's focus on not letting galactic civilization collapse in the next 50 hours. Everything else is tomorrow's problem. Leon found a somewhat clean section of floor and sat down with a toolkit, beginning to catalog which components they could safely remove and replace during the shutdown. Priya created backup procedures for critical databases. Amy monitored security feeds, watching for any sign that someone else might try to interfere with their work. And David wrote code, line by line, building a patch that would save a civilization whose gods had forgotten how to save themselves. The countdown continued its march toward zero. But for the first time since discovering the problem, David felt something like hope. They had a plan. They had access. They had cooperation. Now they just needed to convince the galaxy to go dark for 8 hours and trust that 4 humans and 1 disillusioned architect could bring the light back on. Solomith's voice echoed across every communication channel in the galaxy, and for the first time in his long life, he sounded uncertain. David listened to the broadcast from the server room while making final preparations for the shutdown. After 3 hours of heated debate, the tribunal had finally authorized the procedure. Now every species in known space was hearing the news. Citizens of the galactic community, Solomith said, his usual confidence replaced by careful formality. The architects have identified a technical issue requiring network maintenance. In 30 hours, all communication systems will undergo a planned shutdown lasting approximately 8 hours. We ask for your patience and understanding during this unprecedented event. Unprecedented. That was one way to put it. David suspected that word choices had been debated extensively before settling on language that admitted to a problem without admitting to centuries of negligence. They're not telling them the whole truth, Amy said, monitoring reaction feeds from across the galaxy. They're telling enough, Rita said. She had stayed with the team throughout the preparation, serving as liaison between the humans and increasingly nervous architect administrators. Every government, every corporation, every ship captain now knows the network is going dark. That's what matters for safety. Priya looked up from her database backup procedures. Social feeds are exploding. Some species are panicking. Others are celebrating. Apparently, there's a whole movement of people who think the network is oppressive and want it gone permanently. Great, Leon muttered, testing a replacement power supply he had cobbled together from parts scavenged from non-critical systems. Nothing like doing emergency maintenance while half the galaxy watches and judges. The countdown showed 28 hours until shutdown. David had barely slept in 2 days. His code patch was ready. The procedure was documented. They had run simulations on isolated systems and everything checked out. In theory, this should work. Theory and practice were not always friends. Thessaly entered the server room carrying data tablets and looking exhausted. She had been coordinating with other architect facilities across the network, preparing everyone for what was coming. The outer sectors are ready. They're not happy, but they're ready. A few of the older administrators are still insisting this is unnecessary, that prayer and ritual will solve the problem. Let them pray, Amy said. We'll handle the actual work. The next 28 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Technical teams from other species began reaching out, offering assistance. The Vryn sent their best engineers. The Koleth contributed backup power systems. A species called the Torvan, who nobody had heard much from before, turned out to have been secretly documenting network problems for decades and provided invaluable troubleshooting guides. David realized that the architect's failure had created an unexpected community. Species that had never worked together before were now coordinating across sectors, preparing for the shutdown, offering resources and expertise. The gods' incompetence had accidentally built bridges between civilizations that had previously only interacted through the divine. Network's formal channels, the final hours, before shutdown felt like waiting for a storm. David walked through the server room one last time, checking connections, verifying procedures, making sure nothing had been overlooked. Leon had replaced or reinforced every critical hardware component he could reach. Priya had backed up essential databases to 17 different secure locations. Amy had locked down security so tight that even she needed 3 different authorization codes to access admin functions. We're as ready as we're going to be, David said, looking at his team. They were exhausted, running on coffee and determination, but their eyes were sharp. Everyone knows their role? Nods all around. Rita squeezed David's shoulder. Humanity is proud of you. All of you. Save the pride for after we successfully bring everything back online, David said, but he managed a tired smile. The countdown reached 0. Across the galaxy, the announcement went out. 8 hours of darkness beginning now. David's hands hovered over his keyboard. Initiating shutdown sequence, he said, and pressed enter. The server room filled with a sound like wind dying, a descending whine as systems began powering down in carefully orchestrated sequence. Status lights that had burned for millennia flickered and went dark. The hum that had been constant background noise for generations faded to silence. In the observation window, David could see communication relays going dark across the visible spectrum. One by one, the lights went out. Species across thousands of worlds were losing contact with each other, falling back on local systems, experiencing isolation that most of them had never known. The main servers shut down last. David watched the monitors go black and felt his stomach clench. This was the point of no return. Everything was off. The galactic network was dead. Beginning diagnostic sweep, Priya said, her voice loud in the sudden quiet. She was working from local systems now, running checks on every component before they attempted to bring anything back online. Checking data integrity. Hardware status green across the board, Leon reported. Nothing failed during shutdown. Small miracles. Security systems offline as planned, Amy confirmed. No unauthorized access attempts detected during the process. David opened his code editor and began implementing the patch, writing directly to the core routing system now that it was inactive and safe to modify. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced precision, inserting the fix line by line, verifying each change against his documentation. Time moved strangely in the silent server room. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt like minutes. The galaxy waited in darkness while 4 humans and a handful of alien allies tried to fix what gods had broken. Patch implemented, David finally said, his voice rough from disuse. Running verification. The verification scan crawled through millions of lines of code, checking for conflicts, ensuring the patch had integrated properly, confirming that the memory leak was actually fixed. Green indicators appeared one by one on David's screen. Verification complete, he said. The patch is stable. We're ready to attempt restart. Thessaly had been watching from the doorway, barely breathing. What if it doesn't work? Then we troubleshoot and try again, David said. But I've tested this 100 times. It'll work. He hoped his confidence sounded more genuine than it felt. Initiating startup sequence, David said. Stage 1, power restoration to primary systems. Leon activated the power grid. The server room filled with sound again, tentative at first, then growing stronger. Lights began coming back on. Status indicators changed from black to amber. Warming up, running internal checks. Stage 2, core routing systems. Priya brought the routing system online. The patched code loaded into memory, clean and efficient without the leak that had been slowly killing it for centuries. David watched the memory allocation carefully. No leak, no gradual accumulation of abandoned data. The cleanup routine was working properly. Stage 3, communication relays. Amy activated the relay network sector by sector, bringing the galaxy back together piece by piece. In the observation window, lights began appearing again. Communication channels reopening. Species reconnecting after 8 hours of silence. Stage 4, full network integration. David pressed the final enter key and held his breath. Systems that had been separate began talking to each other again, finding their connections, re-establishing the web of communication that held galactic civilization together. Status lights turned from amber to green. One system, then another, then dozens, then thousands. The galaxy was waking up. We have network connectivity, Priya said, and her voice shook slightly. All sectors reporting online. All primary systems operational. The memory leak is gone. It actually worked. Leon let out a whoop that probably wasn't very professional but expressed exactly what everyone was feeling. Amy slumped in her chair, relief and exhaustion washing over her face. Thessaly's glow brightened until she looked like a small sun in the server room, and David, who had not allowed himself to believe they would succeed until this very moment, closed his eyes and felt the weight of the galaxy lift from his shoulders. They had done it. 4 humans and 1 brave architect had turned off the gods' network and brought it back better than before. Outside, across thousands of worlds, species were reconnecting, finding that their communication was clearer than it had been in living memory, that systems were responding faster, that the divine network actually worked the way it was supposed to. The gods had been fixed by an IT crew, and the galaxy would never be the same. 3 months after what everyone now called the Great Reboot, David sat in a classroom that still felt surreal. The room was filled with students from 17 different species, all of them taking notes while he explained the basics of network troubleshooting. A Vrin engineer practiced reading error logs. A Kolith administrator learned how to set up proper authentication protocols. A young architect named Fenish, Thessaly's apprentice, asked questions about every single line of code they reviewed. The Galactic IT Center had been established in record time, funded by species who had suddenly realized that understanding their technology was more important than worshipping it. The building sat on neutral ground, staffed by volunteers from across known space, dedicated to teaching people how to maintain the systems they all depended on. David finished explaining how to trace a memory leak and opened the floor to questions. Hands, tentacles, and appendages of various types shot up immediately. Yes, Ambassador Corvin? David pointed to a Torvin student in the back row. In your culture, how do you handle administrators who resist learning new methods? Corvin asked. We have encountered this problem in our systems. Documentation and patience, David said. Show them the benefits. When people see that fixing problems actually works better than hoping they go away, most come around eventually. Some never do, and that's when you route around them. Amy entered the classroom carrying coffee for David and what looked like synthesized nectar for herself. She had been teaching cybersecurity in the next room. Her class was apparently so popular that students were sitting in the hallways to listen. How's the advanced group doing? David asked. They broke into the practice server in 40 minutes, Amy said with a mixture of pride and concern. I'm either a great teacher or I'm creating really competent hackers. Maybe both. Leon appeared in the doorway looking excited. "David, you need to see this." We got a response. David excused himself from the class and followed Leon down the corridor to the communications lab. Priya was already there, staring at a screen with an expression of wonder. "Show me," David said. Priya pulled up the message. It was garbled, clearly transmitted across enormous distance using protocols that were almost but not quite compatible with current systems. The translation software struggled with it, producing text that kept shifting as it refined its interpretation. "It's from beyond the explored regions," Priya explained. "Remember those other networks you found? The ones the architect's system was supposed to connect to but lost contact with millennia ago?" David remembered. During the Great Reboot, he had discovered that the network everyone thought was complete was actually just one node in a much larger system. The architects had built their network on top of ruins from something older, something bigger, and then lost the ability to reach beyond their own small corner of space. "Someone out there got our test signal," Leon said, and they responded. David read the translated message. It was simple, almost heartbreaking in its simplicity. "Is anyone there? Our system is failing. We do not know how to fix it. Please help if you can. We have been alone so long." Another civilization, another network, another group of people whose ancestors had built something amazing and whose descendants had forgotten how it worked. They were calling out into the darkness, hoping someone would answer. David looked at his team. Amy was already pulling up star charts, trying to triangulate the signal source. Leon was calculating the resources they would need for a long-range mission. Priya was documenting the message format so they could send a proper reply. "We're going to need approval from the Galactic Council," David said. "This is beyond anything the IT center was set up to handle." "The council will approve it," Thessaly said from the doorway. She had entered quietly, her glow dimmer than it used to be, but her eyes brighter with purpose. "I have already begun the preliminary discussions. There is unanimous support for an expedition." In the 3 months since the Great Reboot, Thessaly had become the face of the new architects, the generation that chose knowledge over mystique. Solomith had retired to a quiet world where he was reportedly writing his memoirs, trying to understand how his civilization had lost its way. Other old guard architects had followed him into retirement or had, remarkably, become students themselves. "How far away is this signal coming from?" David asked. "Approximately 6 months' travel at maximum speed," Thessaly said. "It will be difficult, dangerous. We will be going beyond all mapped space, following signal breadcrumbs, hoping they lead us to whoever sent this message." "We'll need a proper ship," Leon said. "Something that can serve as a mobile IT center, with servers, diagnostic equipment, spare parts, everything. And a mixed crew," Amy added. "Every species that wants to contribute their expertise. This shouldn't be just humans solving everyone's problems. It should be all of us working together." Priya was already drafting a mission proposal. "We'll need at least 3 months to prepare. Recruit crew, outfit the ship, train everyone on long-range system diagnostics, and we need to keep the current IT center running while we're gone." David walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of explored space, people were waiting for help. Their systems were failing. Their knowledge was lost. They were alone and afraid and hoping someone would care enough to answer. "Start recruitment," David said. "Put out a call for volunteers. Engineers, technicians, anyone with skills who's willing to spend 6 months in space helping strangers. And send a message back to whoever sent this signal. Tell them we're coming. Tell them they're not alone anymore." Over the next 3 months, the Galactic IT Center transformed from a teaching facility into mission control for the most ambitious technical support operation in history. Species that had never worked together before collaborated on ship design. The Vryn contributed advanced sensor arrays. The Kolith provided navigation systems. Humans supplied diagnostic protocols and, more importantly, the attitude that no system was too broken to fix. The ship they built was not elegant. It looked like a flying workshop, all function and no form, covered in sensor arrays and communication dishes, and marked with the logo of the new Galactic IT Cooperative, a simple icon showing multiple hands working together to hold up a network. The crew was just as mixed. 47 individuals from 23 species, all volunteers, all trained in the basic philosophy that had saved the galaxy once already. Admit when you don't know something, learn from those who do, and never be afraid to turn it off and on again. David stood on the bridge as the ship prepared to depart. Though they had all agreed not to call it a bridge because that felt too military, it was just the control room, where the pilot sat and where anyone could come to watch the stars. Rita was there for the send-off, now serving as the official human ambassador to the Galactic Council. She hugged each member of the human IT crew. "You're making history," she said. "When you left Earth 4 years ago, nobody could have predicted this." "We're just answering a support ticket," David said, but he was smiling. Really long-distance house call. Thessaly approached, no longer wearing the formal robes of an architect but the practical jumpsuit of a working engineer. "The council sends their blessing and their gratitude. You showed us that gods were never what we needed. We needed teachers, colleagues, friends. You figured it out yourselves," Amy said. "We just pointed at the error logs." The ship began its departure sequence. In the classroom building they were leaving behind, students from across the galaxy continued learning. The network they had saved continued to grow stronger as more people learned to maintain it. The IT help desk that humanity had accidentally created was now staffed around the clock, answering questions from species who were no longer afraid to admit they needed help. As the ship accelerated toward the edge of explored space, following a signal from beyond the darkness, David pulled up a new document on his terminal. He titled it Field Notes for Long-Range Technical Support and began typing. Lesson 1, he wrote. Always assume the system is more broken than they're telling you. Lesson 2, bring more backup supplies than you think you'll need. Lesson 3, if someone says their system has worked perfectly for thousands of years, start looking for the disaster waiting to happen. Leon looked over his shoulder and laughed. You're writing a manual? Someone should, David said. Next time a civilization's technology fails, maybe they'll have a guide for asking for help. Next time? Priya asked. You think there will be more? David looked out at the stars, at the infinite possibilities stretching before them. There are always more broken systems, more forgotten knowledge, more people who need help but are too proud or too scared to ask for it. That's just how civilizations work. Then it's good we learned how to fix things, Amy said. The ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, leaving explored space behind. Ahead, somewhere in the darkness, a distress signal waited. Another network was failing. Another civilization was reaching out. And for the first time in their long isolation, they would receive an answer. The message they sent was simple, transmitted in every format and protocol they could manage, boosted by every relay and repeated until someone would hear it. We received your message. We understand your problem. Help is coming. You are not alone. We are the Galactic IT Cooperative and we're here to help. In the server room of a dying network on a world whose name they did not yet know, an ancient terminal flickered to life. A message appeared on a screen that had been dark for generations. Someone read those words and felt hope for the first time in longer than anyone could remember. Help was coming. The gods had finally learned to answer their prayers. And the answer was 4 humans who knew how to read error logs, a generation of students who chose learning over faith, and a galaxy that discovered the most divine act of all was simply helping each other. The IT ticket that shook the heavens had been resolved. But the real work, the work of maintaining and improving and learning and teaching, that work would never end. And somehow that was exactly how it should be.